Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Rental Rehab with TheHandyTech. Last time we did a little bit of work in my backyard on some old garden beds and an area under a pergola. I showed you how to prep and paint concrete, and we also installed a spa pool. In this episode we're going to carry on our work in the backyard and I'll show you a few more upgrades that I've done. In Western Australia, the design, construction and installation of private swimming and spa pools and their safety barriers is subject to strict building requirements under the building regulations. I consulted these regulations and I need to build a small pool fence to restrict access to the spa pool. So I'm going to give it my best shot because after all, a shitty fence is better than no fence. I went to my local Bunnings and I bought a prefabricated pool gate and a prefab pool fence. I also brought some pool hinges and a lockable gate latch. I probably spent another $20 or so on some hardware. Cool, let's put it all together. So I used a clamp just to hold the gate in the exact place I wanted, and then I could come back with my measuring tape and figure out the length that pool fence had to be. Next I started to prepare the gate, and that meant taking off the plastic cover, and then I could figure out where I wanted to line up those hinges. I used a tape measure to figure out the overall height of the gate, then I made a small mark 200mm in from the top and the bottom. I used a square to extend those lines out, and then that was a center marker for marking the holes for those hinges. You'll notice that I'm marking the circular holes and not the elongated holes on the hinge. The elongated holes allow you to finely adjust the height of the gate against the pool fence. With the holes marked, I knew where to put the screws, so I used a self-tapping hex head metal screw to pre-drill those holes. And then I could go and fix the hinge onto the gate. So now with the hinges installed on the gate, I could line it up next to the fence, and the way I'm lining it up, I'm just leaving a very small difference in height between the fence and the gate, just so that the gate has clearance to swing around. And if you swing the gate open, you actually see there's extra holes there to screw it on two sides of that hinge. That just makes it a whole lot more sturdy. I got the missus to give me a hand measuring the total length. Then I used an angle gauge to transfer the angle of the pole where it's going to intersect the fence onto a mark that I could cut. You can see that I cut the excess off with a straight cut first, and then I could go back and cut that angle in to suit the pole. I also used a file at the end just to tidy up my cuts. I did a little bit of stuffing around with some test fitting just to make sure that my cuts were right, and actually fit really well the first time, so I was pretty happy with that. Now, to attach the gate onto the pergola, I'm going to use some masonry bolts. Unfortunately, the ones that I bought, the collar of that masonry bolt was a little bit too long, so I had to cut it in half. So you can see now how the thread of that masonry bolt will be able to poke through the metal frame. So I made some holes in the frame of the fence, and that allowed me to put 3 of those masonry bolts in. So I just did a quick test fit to make sure they would fit in those holes. I held the gate in place and used the same drill to make a mark on the concrete where I needed to install the masonry bolts. I used an 8mm masonry bit to make some holes in the concrete, and the first hole was just a big blowout, so off camera I actually had to cut another hole into the fence, but the other 2 worked fine. Here are the masonry bolts being installed, and you'll notice I put some big mudguard washers on top of them, and that's just to raise the fence off the ground by a small amount. Now we can set the gate in place, and the thread from those masonry bolts poked through the frame, and I put another one of those mudguard washers before I screwed the nut on, and that's just to help spread the pressure that we're pulling on that little aluminium frame. You can also see the other hole that I had to make because of that blowout in the concrete. I used a couple of scrap pieces of galv to make up some tabs that would screw the fence to the existing pergola. Then I used some paintable silicone to go and fill in all the gaps and just to tidy it up. there I also filled in the hole that wasn't used. Once that silicone set up a bit, I came back with some classic cream touch-up paint, which is the same colour as the pergola and the new fencing, and just covered over that silicone, and you can see how good it looks, just like I bought one. Lastly, we've got to install the gate latch, and that actually posed a few problems. Installing the gate portion of this latch was easy enough, and I didn't even measure, I just sort of eyeballed where it went and it turned out great. However, installing the latch portion on the pergola, I had to come up with some custom brackets. So here's a quick montage of how I made those. Finished result, so you can see the brackets that I've made up will allow me to install that latch on an angle that will suit the gate. Now I can line up the latch exactly where I want it, and then I mark the holes on the brackets that I had made up, and then I could go ahead with a drill and put some big tech screws in. Same as those little tabs that I made before to hold the gate to the pergola, I got some of that touch-up paint and just painted over those new brackets. And it all turned out really well. I'm pretty proud of how it looks. Hopefully you guys picked up some tips on how you could maybe build a pool fence of your own. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up or consider subscribing to the channel. I've got some cool projects coming in the future. Thanks for watching. See you next time.